The cart squeaked. My heart thudded so loud I thought everyone could hear it. I held Eli's hand with one palm and my grocery list with the other. And on that paper were not dreams or plans, just 3 words written in shaky blue ink. Inhaler peanut butter milk. $8 in my wallet. $8 between us and a night when my son could breathe easy. Before we dig deep into this shocking story, kindly hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss real stories that reveal the darkest truths and biggest betrayals. I didn't know his name then. He wore a navy coat, a neat gray scarf, and shoes that didn't squeak. He stood 2 people behind me at the checkout as I fumbled for coins. My hands were slick from the baby wipes I'd used to clean Eli's sticky fingers. He watched not with pity, but with a careful curiosity. The kind that sizes you up like a puzzle someone's determined to solve. Just the essentials? The cashier said, smiling like she'd already judged me kindly. Yeah, I answered, forcing my voice into something steady. We're out of everything. Eli tugged my sleeve and whispered, Mama, I can't breathe right now. He said it like it was normal, like the words had been practiced. My stomach dropped. I tightened my grip on his small hand until I thought I might bruise it. I counted the coins, $2 in change, a crumpled 5 that must have come from somewhere important, 8 in total. The inhaler was more than that. The thought of leaving without it felt like stepping away from him while he drowned. Excuse me, the man behind me said softly. He placed his hand on the top of the cart like he'd been waiting for an opening. Is that for the inhaler? I wanted to say no, that I could do this. That pride mattered more than medicine. I wanted to say 1,000 things, so I only said, yes, it's the inhaler. It's for Eli. He reached into his coat and pulled out a card. Not a credit card, but a white business card with black text. Gideon Mercer, Mercer Holdings. I'd heard the name before. Everyone in our town had. The Mercer family built towers and bought old neighborhoods and made quiet, big decisions. I'll cover it, he said. He placed his card on the counter and left it there like that to make it simple. We all watched him. The cashier's eyes flicked to mine. The people behind us rustled. For a moment, there was a hush that felt more like permission than privacy. Thank you, I said. My voice broke. I wanted to cry, to hug him, to fall to my knees and apologize for all the ways the world had let us down. Instead, I mouthed, thank you, and took the bag as if it were an object and not the difference between sleep in an emergency room. He smiled once, a small private thing. Take care of him, he said. And when we left, he was already turning away. That should have been the end of it. A kind man helped a tired mother and walked on. But the world is rarely that simple. 3 days later, there was a letter waiting in our mailbox. Tom, our neighbor, called it official looking, which was his way of saying we were probably being sued or recruited to a pyramid scheme. The envelope was thick and white, my name written in a careful hand. Inside, an invitation, a quiet fundraiser, a note that read, Ms. Adanna Eze, your boy was seen in the store last week. Mr. Mercer hopes you and your son will join him at the community luncheon on Friday. He would like to speak with you. I stared at the letter until the ink blurred. Eli watched cartoons with the volume low, his chest rising and falling like a metronome that had been set for the wrong tempo. Do we go? He asked. Why would we go? I asked first because it sounded safer. What could he want? He could have wanted a photo for publicity. He could have wanted to be thanked on a stage. He could have been the kind of man who liked to own other people's gratitude. But the way the letter had been written was personal. Direct, not flashy nagging at me. And there was the inhaler, now sitting on my kitchen counter looking like a small, silent miracle. It had bought us 3 nights of sleep. It deserved a face-to-face. We went. The Mercer Foundation Hall smelled of polished wood and lilies. Men in pressed suits and women in skirts that whispered, when they walked, filled the room. Gideon saw us almost the minute we stepped in. He stood and made his way across the room. Not like a man who owned a place, though he did, but like someone who'd been waiting for a conversation that mattered, more than the room he occupied. You didn't have to come, he said, voice low enough so only we could hear. He nodded to Eli like he already knew his name. How is he? He's better, I said. Because of you. He shook his head. Because of you, he corrected gently. You asked for help. You took action. Then he told us a story. Years ago, before his hair had gone salt at the temples, and before his company turned into a name. On every skyline, Gideon had been a father of a boy named Jonah. Jonah had been 5 when an asthma attack almost killed him. The medicine back then was different, the hospital staff thinner. They fought to save him, and the world held its breath. A young nurse had stayed past her shift, held the boy's hand, and refused to leave until he took his first steady breath. Gideon never forgot the woman who had given him back his son. He became rich not to buy things, he said, but to make it possible to notice and help. I don't give money because it's my duty, he told me. I give because someone once reached for my boy, and I will never forget that hand. It felt like a confession. I felt small and big at the same time. Small because my life had been so ordinary. Big because a man like Gideon had seen me in the grocery line and decided, for reasons that were as human as pain, to intervene. The luncheon ended with speeches about philanthropy and community and the word responsibility being used until it felt like a brand. But afterwards, when the room had thinned and the light had softened, Gideon asked if he could do something more than pay a bill. What would help you? Tell me honestly. I thought of job listings with tiny print and impossible requirements. I thought of nights listening for breathing and mornings, pushing through a day that wanted more energy than I had. I told him about the center on the other side of town that taught adults to code, to fix generators to become baristas, a place that could change the lives of people, like me if only the doors were unlocked for us. He listened, not with the absent attention of a man memorizing a charity's pitch, but like someone cataloging the world so he could change it. Let me come see it, he said. Weeks later, Mercer Holdings sponsored a new wing at the center. Leaders came, cameras came. The donation made headlines and faces smiled, and the plaque had Gideon's name on it in letters like a promise. But then, beneath the ribbon-cutting photos, a whisper started. The construction company hired to build the new wing was contracted from a list Gideon's company kept, the supplier for the inhalers used by our kids had a private label, deal with one of his subsidiaries. One with pricing that could have been lower if someone had wanted it to be. People started to ask hard questions. The news cycles don't like neat stories. They like complexity. I watched as Gideon's kindness came under a microscope. The same hands that handed me a solution were also accused of squeezing the system for profit. He spoke at press events, his voice measured, apologetic when necessary, defiant when necessary. He promised transparency. He opened ledgers, hired auditors, and put people in charge who never used the phrase conflict of interest lightly. One night, after an article suggested Mercer Holdings had cut corners, I found a note slid under our door. Meet me at the park by the old oak. Midnight. Gideon had always been punctual. A note in that hand felt urgent and raw. I went. He was there, alone, shoes dusty, coat buttoned wrong like he hadn't had time to fix it. The moon was low and the oak threw long, cradling shadows. They'll try to make this about me, he said without preamble. But this isn't about me. What is it about? I asked. It's about how systems fail people like you. The inhaler you bought was from a supplier my company had a contract with, because it made business sense then. But business sense does not equal moral sense. We cut corners in places no one wanted to audit. I'm owning that. He looked at me like he expected me to recoil. I helped you because someone helped my boy, but I will not let my company keep hurting people in other ways. The next months were brutal. Boardrooms filled with lawyers. The press dug into old contracts and relationships, and the truth was messy. Mercer Holdings paid for community programs and also had to pay fines. People protested. Supporters defended him. I felt like an actor in someone else's tragedy. The poor woman made into a symbol by camera lights and charity dinners. And then the day came when the truth that mattered to me, not the headlines, but the one that lived on my kitchen counter was clear. Mercer's company negotiated lower prices for essential asthma medication nationwide. Contracts were rewritten. The supplier was replaced. Clinics were restocked. My son's inhaler, once a luxury, became standard in clinics across the city. What changed things wasn't one man's wallet. It was a public reckoning that forced systems to bend toward people who had no power except the power to breathe and to demand to be heard. Gideon didn't become a saint. He lost deals, he lost allies, and the people who benefited from the old ways gnashed their teeth. He also sat at my kitchen table once, long after the cameras had left, and listened while Eli explained how he liked dinosaurs, because they were big and brave and never needed inhalers. "You two saved me more than once," he told us quietly. "You reminded me what I was trying to do in the first place." Years later, when Eli was taller and his inhalers less frequent, a photo surfaced of that first grocery line. Me, tired. Eli clinging to a stuffed T-Rex. Gideon, blurred in the background like an afterimage. The photo went viral, then faded. But the changes that followed didn't. The clinic stayed funded. The center stayed open. Eli joined a kids' soccer team that pooled money and bought jerseys. I watched him run, lungs full, and felt my heart stretch with a kind of quiet, fierce pride. Life taught me that kindness is rarely simple. The man who paid for our inhaler also signed contracts that needed to be fixed. He was both the problem and part of the solution. I learned to accept help when it came, but to ask questions afterward. I learned that gratitude doesn't mean silence. Sometimes, when I pass a Mercer Holdings building, I think of the card he left on the counter and how a single action can ripple. I think of Jonah and the nurse who stayed that night. I think of small hands that kept a boy alive, and big hands that later built towers, and how both hands were sometimes the same. Eli is 13 now. He still has asthma, but it doesn't define him. He breathes like a kid who will one day become something loud and curious and stubborn. And on days when the sky is enormous, we walk to the grocery store, and he holds my hand the same way, and sometimes, if we're lucky, a stranger will offer something and a smile and nod. Or the quiet certainty that in a city of sharp corners, there is still a place for people who decide to do the right thing, even when the right thing is hard. Months after the scandal faded, Adanna tucked Eli into bed and went to clear her table. That's when she saw it. A plain white envelope on her doormat. No stamp, no sender. Just her name, written in the same careful handwriting as before. She tore it open slowly. Inside was a single photograph. The old grocery store checkout line. Her and Eli in the frame. But this time she noticed something she'd never seen before. Behind Gideon, standing half hidden by the aisle, was a woman in a nurse's uniform. The same nurse who had once saved Gideon's son. And scribbled across the bottom of the photo in Gideon's handwriting were 6 chilling words. "She's back. Don't trust anyone. Yet." Adanna froze. The air felt colder, heavier. She turned toward the window, and in the reflection, she thought she saw a familiar silhouette watching from across the street. Sometimes kindness comes with a shadow. If you liked this story and want more real, dramatic tales that dig into truth, betrayal, and redemption, hit like, subscribe, and keep watching.